Good morning and welcome to the Communications Masterclass. Thanks for watching the replay. We're glad you're here. And Vicki and Dee Dee, I am so glad that you are here today. Today we are going to be talking about eliminating your nerves when you're speaking to a group. Now I know both of you are accomplished speakers. You've done this a long time, but there's always a chance to learn some new little trick for next time. Now, 75% of Americans have glossophobia. Glossophobia is the fear of speaking in front of a group. And some of those people, bless their hearts, they're afraid of speaking in front of just one other person. So we are blessed that we're not that nervous. But I will tell you that anytime before I speak, I am terrified. I pace. I pace like a wild animal. I pace and I pray and I pray and I pace and I breathe and I pray and I pace. That is not my recommendation to you today. I am just telling you what I do. But the important thing to remember is that you do not have to feel confident to sound confident. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, what causes nerves and anxiety before we're going to speak? Actually, nerves are not a bad thing. Nerves are energy. It's your body preparing you to perform. The question is, what do you do with that energy? Most people choose to suppress it or try to hide it. Hello, Nisha, welcome. So they try to suppress it or hide it, and instead it still leaks out. And when it leaks out in their voice, it leaks out in their pace, and it leaks out in their breathing. So what we need to do is learn how to control those three things, and that is the definition of confidence. Being able to control your breathing, your pace, and your voice. Now, the first big thing is your breathing, because that's the basis of everything that you have. When you breathe and you're nervous, you have a tendency to breathe very shallow. And then what happens is you don't have enough air in your lungs when you're talking. So you run out of air in the middle of your sentence. And then you start panicking. So it becomes just a circle of having a breathing problem. So what you want to do before you start is what I've referred to before as the 4-2-6 breathing. And 4-2-6 is where you breathe in for 4, one last sniff, hold it for 2, and then release it for 6. You want to release it all the way to 6 because you want to get all that carbon dioxide out of your lungs so that the next breath you take will be full. So let's do it together. 4-2-6. 4 in. Take one last sniff to fill your lungs. Hold. 2 and release for 6. Now, if you do that 2 times before you start talking, I feel relaxation right here. So that will definitely help you. The other thing to remember with breathing is that you don't ever want to start unless your lungs are full. Because when you do, that's when you run out of air in mid-sentence. And that's when your brain panics, and that's when you breathe more shallow, and it becomes a circuit. So you want to make sure that your breathing is everything it can be. The second place that you're going to find a problem is in your voice. And that also has to do with your breathing. Because when you're nervous, your voice gets a little bit higher and it can sound a little shaky. So if you're controlling your breathing, you shouldn't have that problem. You shouldn't have that shake in your voice. But you still want to make a conscious effort to go just a little lower. I mean, don't sound ridiculous, but you want to just consciously bring yourself down. So you're a little slower, you're a little lower, and you're a little controlled. and that will help your voice be more controlled in the process. So that addresses your breathing and that addresses your voice. But what about your speed? What a lot of people do when they are speaking is if they're nervous, they speak faster because they want to get it over with. But when you speak faster, your voice elevates. It makes it tougher for you to breathe. You get yourself all scrambled. It also affects your authority and your clarity. And therefore, when you lose your clarity and you lose your authority, you also lose your audience. So you want to make sure that you are keeping your pace at a place that makes a lot of sense. Yes, Miss Vicky.
Okay, so I've heard both of those things. I've heard the speak slower, etc. And I've also heard the speak faster when you're like podcasting or you're like, doing a certain thing. And I want to know is the difference between you speaking to an audience live, speak slower, or is it speak slower in all areas? Um are we talking about in front of an audience, or are we just talking about um you speak faster this way, slower this way, faster this way, and slower, you utilizing that? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do, and I've read a lot of things about speaking faster in podcasting. And
Oh.
they say that because when you are in front of a person, you can feel the engagement. When you're going
Mhm.
through Zoom, you don't
Yeah.
feel the same engagement. Therefore, you need to speak a little bit faster to keep them engaged.
Yeah. I see. I see.
But you still need to speak slow enough that you are clear and that you're not losing your words, that you're not affecting your breathing. So it's better to speak slower on a podcast as opposed to lose people. But you're right, you do want to speed up ever so slightly on a podcast.
I've also heard and I've witnessed this, that the audience I speak to when they're younger, they speak much faster than we do and at a
Mhm,
speed that is just alarmingly fast. And
mhm,
I have an incident where my stepson said to me, he was like listening to me talk, and he was like, "Oh God, just get to the point," because I was speaking so slowly, and they speak at a
mhm,
pace that sounds about like this when they're very excited, and this is how they can talk, and they can keep this speed up for a long time, which is very fast for me, and I'm concentrating at speaking at this speed.
mhm.
And I wonder if the audience matters or the age of the audience matters as well.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right, and those are two more good points. The audience always matters, whether it's age or something else. You need to, and in the process, you're reading them, which is a lot easier when you're live as opposed to on video because I don't
Yes.
know if your hand is actually
Yeah.
over here playing with your phone.
Yes.
Um, but you're right, younger people. I wrote an article about that based on your stepson's story of, all right already, get to the bottom line. You speak
Yeah.
so slowly.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that was a generational thing, but it is.
It is. It absolutely is. But where you slow down is where you need control. So, regardless of who you're talking to, you need to control the conversation. You need to control yourself. And if you're talking too fast, that you can't keep your breath up, if you're talking too fast and you're slurring your words, you're going to lose your audience anyway. So, better to slow down slightly. Now, good communicators don't rush less, they pause more. So, for example, if we'll say something like, we are having problems with our communication. Last week, when we communicated, 3 teams got lost in the process. So there was a pause there. Yes, it was a little slow, but it also was more impactful. It kept you waiting for, okay, why do we need to improve our communication? Something's going on. So you don't have to speak so slowly that turtles pass you, but do feel inclined to pause more. That will help you. It'll keep your brain caught up with where you are. It'll keep people leaning into you. And that's what you want. You want them leaning in for what's going on. Now, once you've controlled your breath and you've controlled your voice and you've controlled your um, your speed, then you pretty much have things under control with these 6 more tips. So, tip number 1, breathe. What we've already talked about, 426. And if you get lost in the beginning or in your speech somewhere, don't panic, breathe. Just breathe. And you can do a 426 breath in front of other people. You just don't want to go when you blow out. But give yourself a chance to have a deep breath. They will wait for you. The second thing you need to do is have an opening line. Now, in conversations, there are times where we need to be impromptu. Somebody throws a question out of left field and you just have to answer it. You've got to figure it out on the fly. But if you're doing a presentation or a meeting and you're going to present something at a meeting, a point, or an idea, or something like that, you want to always know what your first line is because your first line will anchor you. You don't want to memorize your entire speech. It sounds like you memorized your entire speech. It also puts you in a bad place because if you then lose your place in your mind, then people will panic because they've got their speech in their mind and now I don't remember what's next. Just start with the first sentence. I'm speaking tonight in front of my Toastmasters group. My first line is, I like walking on the beach and seeing my footprints. Now, what does that matter to you? Nothing. But to me, it reminds me this is where I'm starting. This is my topic. This is where I start. And everything else that I've practiced falls right underneath that. So we don't want to lose that. So breathe. Know what your first line is. The third thing you want to do is anchor yourself. Plant your feet. When you plant your feet, you're less inclined to sway and shift and wander around, go back and forth on your feet or get your body moving back and forth. So you want to plant your feet firmly into the ground and root them. Because when you move around like that, it signals nervous energy to people. And you don't want nervous energy. The fourth thing that you want to do is watch your hands. Now, I don't want to get political. I just want to make a general statement. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, everybody picks on him because he's always using his hands, constantly doing things all over the place, extremely distracting. So, you want to keep your hands at your sides and just use your hands and your arms to emphasize certain points. Because if you're fidgeting like this, or if you're doing this, or you're fidgeting with your hands in front of you, again, that is signaling nerves. And nerves feed nerves. And you don't want to do that. So, yes, Vicki.
I wanna go a little deeper on this subject here because when I'm on stage, there's a couple of things that throw me off. One is if there's an interruption and they come and tell me, "Well, you don't have 45 minutes, now you have 35." I'll go up on stage and take my 45 minutes. I don't care. I'll just keep going, and they're like, how they have those in front of the stages, they have where your PowerPoint is there so you can see the slide there, but they
Mhm,
have this tick tock of a clock going off the whole time that you're on the stage. So when you're walking back and forth, I tend to not look down and know that thing. But what I want to ask you is, when you get thrown off by a something where you're presenting and you have to gather yourself really quick in the middle of your performance, like there is a time I went blank on stage where I was like, huh. So I turned to the audience and I went, I don't know why I have this PowerPoint slide up. I can't remember. And everybody laughs and it eases something, but I try to tell them what's going on in the moment. But the pressure that we have uh, when you're on stage, you can start confident and something can happen or somebody will say, "Well, you get halftime," or whatever. Um, that to me is a place where you have to reset when you're off a bit. And
mhm,
I wanna know when you're on stage, what do you do to reset right then when you're on stage? Or do you come out and say, "I don't care"? I mean, I'll stand up in front of the audience and go, "You guys wanna hear what I have to say, yes?"
mhm,
And I move them out of the way. I don't let them take time away from me when I'm on stage. I did that one time in my life. That's it. So, what do you do when you have to come back to center and you have spinning stuff to deal with, and you're actually trying to manage it well in front of a live audience.
mhm,
And this is live. It's not Zoom or anything else. Zoom is easy to take care of. Live is
mhm.
where you're most likely to be thrown off.
I have 3 situations with 3 different answers on that. And just like you've done in the past, it's on the fly and you figure out what you're going to do. I was giving a presentation and the guy in the front row had it was some type of a supplement that was popular years ago. It was a spray, a mouth spray. And he pulled out 6 of these little cans and went spray, spray, and set it down and sort of clacked it when it hit the table. And he waited a minute and then he did the next one, spray, spray. Well, I tried to work through it and I found it very distracting. And so I looked at him and I said, "We'll just wait till you're finished." And I didn't want to be rude, but he was being rude. And I wasn't going to be thrown off because somebody did something. Now,
It's like they
things
try to
happen.
hijack you. They try to hijack you, even professionally, when you're in front of 3,000 people, they'll try to hijack the attention.
Exactly. You need to be careful. Now sometimes things happen. A waiter drops a tray. That's going to get everybody's attention. But it's a quick moment, and I'll say something like, "Everything okay?" All right, then I'm going to keep talking. I had a situation in a presentation a couple of months ago. I was having a bad memory day and I had a speech that night. And that sucks because I wasn't sure that I could remember everything. And I don't memorize a script. That does not work because truly, as I said earlier, you have it in your brain. And if you lose your place, now you've lost everything. So you don't memorize a script. But I could not for the life of me remember what the rest of my speech was. And so I paused. And it felt like forever that I was pausing. But then it all came back together and I kept talking and we went with it. And afterwards, this was at Toastmasters, and at Toastmasters, you have an evaluator who then evaluates your speech in front of everybody and you. And I talked to them afterwards and I said, I am so sorry. I am so embarrassed. I have never forgotten an entire speech in the middle, but I just went blank. And she said, I didn't notice that. And I said, well, I just paused. I didn't, that was the best thing to do. She said, oh, I thought that was for effect. So, depending on your situation, even though it seems like forever, just pausing can help you get on track. And then there are times where you're just screwed and you have no idea why that screen is up there and what you were supposed to say. And that's where you just call yourself out and say exactly what you did. Huh, son of a gun. I have no idea why that's up there. And then they'll laugh with you and that'll break the ice and then you'll remember. So I think that it depends on the situation. And I think that you need to hold your own. If that means calling somebody else out, if that means laughing at yourself, or if you can, just pause and see what happens. Okay? Dee Dee.
I'm a bit on the autistic side of the realm of reaction. I can act,
Mhm.
and I've taught in many classrooms. And then when I have those gaps, strangely enough, someone knows and fills it in for me. but but reacting to situations quickly sometimes is not my better suit. It
Mhm.
takes me, and I just freeze.
Mhm.
And I kind of like, well, what do you mean? Or, something like this, because I don't get their signals when they're messaging me. I don't understand what they mean. So, what cues could you give us to help with that kind of situation?
That's a good question. And that's not an area that I'm really adept at. But
Okay.
I think that and we'll let Vic jump in here and then I'll say my part. Go ahead, Vicky.
So when I'm speaking, no matter what I'm doing, I'm not speaking so that they like me or speaking so that they understand me. I'm speaking so that I serve an audience. And when I serve an audience, I'm all about what the audience wants to talk about or what the audience wants to see or do. And what happened was, for me, the life-changing event was way back, like over 20 years ago. I went to go see Deepak Chopra. And Deepak Chopra, when he was on stage, he came out and he had no agenda. And he looked at the audience, and there was about 5,000 people in the audience. That's about the size of the audience. And he shouted out to them, he goes, "What do you guys want to talk about tonight?" And he said, "Just shout it out to me." So there was some people shouted from this side of the auditorium and people shouted from that side. And he was like listening to the things and he gathered all the information. He said, "Oh, okay. I know what you want to talk about tonight." And I never forgot that. I was a professional speaker. I was already being paid to speak. And here I was watching what I thought was a superhuman speaker, know his content so well that he just didn't even have to there's it's like when we follow a pattern, that's where we get stuck. That's what happens. So, when I realized that, I never made a script again, and I ask who's in there, and if you literally are serving somebody with that mindset, you don't get lost, you become present in the moment, and that's what he showed me how to do as a speaker. It's like you wanna be in this really excellent area of speaking, then know your material, know that it's not you, you're not trying to create more authority or influence or anything else, you're just trying to be real and be present with that audience, which I've seen you do actually, Dee Dee. And the thing is, once you put you away, there's nobody to get stuck with. There's no stuckness. It's just being in the moment and using the tips that Karen is talking as to, being as real as you can. And that to me is uh, the one thing that I want to share that I learned that really skyrocketed my success.
It's fascinating. Dee Dee, what did you want to say?
It's true. Most of the times she's heard me talk, I've been lecturing on something I've been studying for a long time. And it's clear. But with this AI where I'm learning and then teaching and then learning and then teaching, I haven't, I'm kind of stuck to a script in some way right now. And I'm
Mhm,
trying to break myself of that. And maybe it's better just to make a pin line of
mhm,
each area I want to cover or something, you
mhm,
know, to where I can flash at the pin line and say, oh, yeah, you're in this part now. You've
mhm,
discussed AI, large language models. Now you're on to how to work with prompts,
mhm.
things like that. It's just very difficult with this quick learning method because I don't memorize so quickly.
Well, that to me is not I'm so sorry, Karen, I just interrupted, but,
No, go ahead.
one of the things that I think is so important is what Karen told us before, which is what I'm working with right now. It's like when you're in front of an audience, it's easy because you have an audience to read. When you're teaching online, when you're doing a
Mhm.
podcast and there's not an actual audience in front of you, it's like Nisha right now, she is listening intently, but I don't know that. There's nothing to read, and it's more of a risk to put yourself out there when there's, screens where there's just there's screens of people looking at you, but there's you and just the mic or in that podcast thing. And I think that that single thing is the tweaking that needs to be done in speaking.
Mhm. No, that's a good point, and I do love that story about chakra. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And Dee Dee, it's good to know that when you know your stuff like the back of your hand, that that's not an issue, and you're
Mhm.
still in the AI learning process, but you know so much more than you realize you do. So if you get caught, you're going to be there. Now, if you approach it with a structure,
Mhm.
and the structure would look something like point, explain, example, stop talking. So so the point would be we have to point, we have to improve our communication skills. Explain. Our messages are inconsistent and unclear. Example. In last week's communication, 3 teams were confused. Stop talking. So if you back to your pin line that you're talking about, if you just have those couple of points that you want to discuss, and then you flesh it out by explaining what you mean and giving an example, that will it's like knowing what your first line is. It sets you off in the right foot. Does that sound like something that might help?
Absolutely. It sounds like something I can even structure with my AI assistant or my assistant.
Mhm. Very good.
And so I can actually take a course and then pin line them like that. Say, I'd like to make pin lines for these, and I want point, example, and reason and example.
Yeah,
Um,
point, explanation, and example.
Thank you. I got example twice. Explanation. That was what I was, explanation and example. Trying to write too fast.
So
Stuttering.
that's excellent.
Okay, so we were on five. I'm sorry. We were on five, and I'm still trying to make that list five and six.
Very good. Let me just regroup. So we have breathing, we have starting with your first sentence, we have anchoring your feet, we have um, your hands and arms, making sure that they're not going all over the place. Number five is that you want to drop your voice slightly. And again, it goes to slower, lower, controlled. And the last thing is something that I find very, very helpful for me, both from a nerve standpoint as well as from a confidence building standpoint from the audience. And that is whether you're talking to a meeting of 6 people or you're talking to an audience of 1,000 people. Talk to one person at a time, look them in the eye, and talk to them. And then move to the next person and look them in the eye and talk to them. You're having one person, one conversation. They realize they're now intimately involved in what you're doing. And people see that you are intimately involved. And then you move to the next person. So you're not talking to 1,000 people. You're talking to one person at a time. And that will control your nerves because the person you're talking to generally will be looking at you very interested. So that builds support for you that, hey, I'm talking and they're listening to me. So that's a good thing. So that's the last point of the six, to talk to one person at a time. Now, I know there are no ESL speakers here. What?
The one thing I wanna talk about is just what you just said, and what you just said is, like, there's a screen full of people, and, when you're talking, there's also, uh, this little game an audience plays. Um an audience doesn't wanna tell you that they're having an aha moment as you're speaking. They wanna look stoic so that other people don't go, "That was a great idea," because they think maybe they might look stupid. So what happens is the audience is practiced looking stoic. They're like, I already know all of the stuff you already told me, and I've already known this before. And they play this game with you where they want to tell you, yes, this is really significant. And that's there. And so what happens is you have to start reading the audience online, especially in a different way. So
Mhm.
you can see their energy field like, ooh. And what I look at is anybody who starts writing stuff down is having an aha moment when they're like,
Mhm,
and you see them do that. So that's part of the reading of the room that you have to do that's different based on whether you're live or whether you're in person. But that thing that she just expressed about that, it made me giggle because I was like, "Oh, yeah, been there, done that. I've seen that before." And reading that audience, it's like you have to learn a braille, you
mhm.
know?
Yes. Dee Dee, I'll be right there. Ms. Verma, thank you for joining us today. I'm glad that you're here. And would you just take a moment and tell me how to pronounce your first name so I do it correctly? Okay, she may not be able to speak now, but she is a new member of our community, and I'm glad she's here. Okay, Dee Dee, what did you want to say?
So, one of the hardest moments I've ever had public speaking is when the person who was supposed to, I was at a conference for new energy and so on in Canada, and they had brought a whole group of us up there. And the person who was supposed to introduce me turned on me and sabotaged me in the middle of this introduction. She was supposed to introduce me, and she went totally rogue. And finally, they had to send somebody up to grab her and pull her off. And I got up there, and my whole speech initially was blown because now I had to explain this kind of situation that had arisen. And boy, I stumbled through it and got back onto topic. But wow, it was the worst and darkest moment I've ever had. And my opinion for that person, uh, you know, and their moments of sabotage and so on was really changed my way. What do you do when your introduction totally goes off and just leaves you in the dust to kind of have to explain a situation that has nothing to do with what you're lecturing?
I've had to do that before where I've provided an introduction and the person either did their own thing or they just said, and here's Karen Sachs. Okay. Then I do my own introduction and I say, let me tell you a little bit about myself. But um, I don't let that person sabotage me. It's hard. It is so hard because you're now flummoxed about what the heck just happened. Did they do that on purpose to me? What, now I've got to reorganize my thoughts, but just take control of the situation in spite of them. I used to work for a man by the name of Barry. Barry was not a good leader. And we had a saying, SSIOB, SSIOB, success in spite of Barry. So that's what we do when you get somebody like that who tried to sabotage you. You have success in spite of them and show them that they didn't get to you because that is the worst punishment to them to know that they didn't succeed.
Yeah.
Vic, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I wanna say that that's very unusual. It's like when you're paid to speak, they spend a lot of time prepping your bio and everything else. It's very unusual that those things happen and that one-off thing. And whoever Barry was, and I know who you're talking about, those aren't professional people. When you when you begin to, when you begin to be an authority or an influencer or any kind of that thing, they take great care because they're so part of their brand is look who we got for you to speak. Look who we got on stage. They want the best of the best of the best of the best that they can have on stage with you. So that point is because they're looking for people to go, ooh, I want to see Vicky speak live, or I want to see Karen speak live. One of those things. So it's very unusual for that to happen. I'm sorry it happened to both of you. And at the same time, it doesn't usually that's not usually they're like Karen has introduced me boatloads of times, and she does a brilliant job of doing it over and over again. Thank you for that, by the way.
I,
And
I
thank you.
I was surprised. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I was really surprised, and I hadn't taken any. Hi, I hadn't taken any language course. I mean, speaking courses or so on. I had just learned in university in EDC and and it was. I don't know how I got through. I guess I kind of did the introduction myself, but I had to kind of explain what that was beforehand. And I said, well, obviously she really wants you to know about, esoteric life in Crestone. We have a lot of it. I just joked my way through it.
Mhm.
But there was that moment where you don't remember how you got through because it was so critical. Your mind kind of goes blank. Well, that's what it was. And I mean, I made it through, but I have no idea how.
Well, but using humor is always a good thing. Humor always breaks the ice, not just for them, but it breaks the ice for you too if you're nervous. And the other thing is remember that success in spite of
Like,
Barry
yeah,
or in spite of
and when you're
whoever.
talking to a scientific community, they're all very serious, and you're talking about electromagnetic power and so on and so forth, and they're all got their PhD, PDSs, whatever, you
Mhm.
know. And you're sitting there talking about this thing, and you don't want to come off with humor because that audience doesn't want to hear humor. They take it too seriously. So it was kind of like the wrong thing at the right time. The only reason I knew I had had success in the talk was that when I did the course afterwards
Mhm.
to give the experiments and examples, 8 times the people showed up that we expected. We were packed. There was no room, not enough experimental tables and everything.
Well,
But
that's great. You succeeded in spite of her, and
yes.
that's great. That's great. I want to talk now a little bit about being nervous on stage versus being nervous in meetings versus being nervous online. So, stage is the most vulnerable because you're up there naked in front of however many people. They have paid to see you, or someone has paid you to, for them to see you. And they are expecting you to have a level of expertise and to be a good speaker. So it's really important that you remember the 6 tips that I gave you about breathing, about knowing your first line, anchoring your feet, watching your hands, um, lowering your voice slightly, and speaking to one person at a time. Because that's the arsenal that you have when you are out there in the middle of the stage by yourself. And if something happens, you don't panic, you breathe, you pause for a moment, and if you have to, you laugh at yourself. So that is the most vulnerable you're going to be in terms of these situations. In a meeting, there's a different kind of vulnerability. You're now in a meeting with 6 people that maybe you work with, 6 of the bosses, and you're going to pitch an idea that's important to you. Now, what makes that more vulnerable is that you know these people and they know you, and you're going to see them again. So, that is why it is extremely important that you are prepared with your breath and with your first sentence and remembering point, explain, example, stop talking. Because in that situation, it's very easy to start over explaining. If you see that they don't seem to be getting it, or they look bored, or they're checking their phone, you take that personally. And so you think if you tell them just a little bit more, they'll get it this time. It doesn't work that way. What you want to do in that situation is ask a question. What do you think about what I've said so far? Does this make sense to you? Joe, what do you think about what I said? That gives the conversation a break. It gets some type of response. It calls everybody back to attention because now you've been talking to them, but they may think you're talking at them. Totally different. If they feel like they're being talked at, but then you ask a question, the question suddenly says, oh, they're talking to me. I need to pay attention. What did they just say? So in meetings, you need to be more prepared with breathing, first sentence, the point, explain, example, stop talking, and with questions. The last place that people get nervous is when they're online and they're in a Zoom meeting, or if you're doing a podcast. So you don't have another face there. You're just talking to the little light at the top of your computer or the little red dot on Vicky's computer. That can be very challenging for people. Now, first, I want to talk about when you have a group of people in front of you. On one hand, most people don't find talking to a group of people online as nerve-wracking as other situations. They're not quite as nervous. And the cool thing is that if you are nervous, you can do things like breathing. You can do things like fidgeting or whatever off screen. You just need to make sure that you're keeping your eyes on the screen. It's also a place where you can see if people aren't paying attention to you. And that can be disconcerting. And it's tough when you're online and it's a long meeting. It's really easy to say, well, I'm just going to look at my phone for a second. But then you see a text message, which you respond to. And then you're over here doing this, and people are talking to you, and you're saying, yeah, that's right, I agree, when you're obviously not paying attention. In that situation, that can make you nervous when you realize that you've lost your audience. And so that's where you ask questions again. And that's a place where, as a post, you can make a general statement like, does it make sense what I'm saying? Does this make sense to you? And depending on the feedback, it's okay to say, Dee Dee, what do you think? And now suddenly, Dee Dee, who's answering messages on her phone, says, oh, yes, I'm with you now. So you've been called on it. So that's how you bring them back. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of online is when you are doing a podcast or you're doing a video and you don't have an audience. Having an audience on a Zoom call is better than having no audience at all, because you're talking to this blasted thing of plastic and glass. You have no feedback whatsoever. If you pause for a moment, you don't have a person to look at to say, okay, this is real, I can do it. This is where it's really, really important to breathe. You need to have your points. You need to have your pin line or have your outline. Not a script, but know what you're going to say. If it means having a piece of paper next to you, just right there, that you might occasionally look over. Another way to do that is to have your glass of water there, so that if you are going to look at a piece of paper, you get your water, you scan. and you're back and you just looked at your notes. But I'm right-handed, so I have to put my drink back over here. um, but you need to be prepared and you need to breathe. And you need to know that you're going to screw up. And you need to do something that not do something that I do far too often, because I get very nervous when I do podcasts. I stop it, and I do it again. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't make it your best effort. And if you really flub up, you want to make it right. But people know that this is live and this is real. And so you take a deep breath, you have your notes, and you just keep talking. So that's preparing for nerves in different types of areas. Now, we don't have any ESL speakers online, to the best of my knowledge. So, but I still want to talk about ESL because I do know that I've got some followers in school who watch the replay. So I just want to take a moment and talk about being nervous if you're an ESL speaker. It is common for everybody to have the breathing problem and the speaking fast problem that I talked about earlier. Whether you're a native English speaker or you're ESL, it's just human nature that you breathe more shallowly and you want to talk faster. Where we run into a problem with that with ESL is that when you're speaking more quickly, you become less clear. Now, that happens when you're an English speaker, you're less clear. But when you add an accent to it, that's a problem. So it's very important that not only are you breathing properly, but that you slow yourself down. I know some of my clients, when they are speaking slowly and they're thinking about what they're saying, they articulate beautifully. But when they get nervous or they're not concentrating, they speak more quickly and they lose the articulation of the TH, the T, the D, the S, the W, the I sound versus the E sound. Another thing that happens when ESL speakers speak quickly is that they lose the end of words, especially the ing, but also if a word ends in a hard consonant, like need, it turns into knee. Now, you can figure out in context what you're talking about, but you're straining the brain of the person who's listening to you. And that's a way to lose your audience. And if you feel like you're losing your audience, you become more nervous. So it's very important if you're an ESL speaker to slow down and breathe, more so than a native English speaker. So in summary, we all get nervous, but you don't have to feel confident to sound confident. You just need to remember to breathe and speak slowly. You need to remember to not fidget by anchoring your feet, rooting them into the ground. You want to remember to speak to one person at a time. And most importantly, you want to breathe. I can't say that enough because that controls your voice, and your voice controls your confidence. This is not about one presentation or one conversation. This is about every conversation that you have, every presentation that you have, because every time you do it, you convince your voice and you convince your brain that you can do it. And the more you convince yourself that you can, the less nervous you'll be. Does anybody have any questions? Well, then I'm going to turn off the recording for a moment and keep you on so I can ask you some questions. So thank you for watching the replay. I hope it was helpful. And if you have any questions, you know that you can always messenger me on school.